Okay, so when it comes to cutting out the Cici swimsuit, what we're going to do is we're going to fold our fabric into half. So you've got your raw edge here, so your selvage edge, and then you've got your fold at this side. I'm going to start off with the pieces that don't necessarily need to be on the fold. So I'm going to start with the top part because we want to cut a pair of those, so that's there. Then what I'm going to do is with the back piece is I'm going to trace this out, and then I'm going to mark it and flip it over so that fits into this space here. This is the top skirt, and the top skirt, the skirted part that sits over the top, you only need one of these, but it does need to be cut on the fold. So I'm then going to cut that out. Then what I'm going to do is, because these two pieces need to be on the fold, I'm actually going to cut along here, and then I'm going to do the next section. Now, the options you have are, there are measurements on the back of your sewing pattern for if you want to use lining. Now, because I've got enough fabric left of this, I'm actually going to self-line my back. So I'm going to cut two of my back pieces rather than one in fabric and one in lining. So again, like I did with the back top section, I'm going to cut around this. Again, depending on how confident you are, feel free to pin or mark. But if you're happy to weight down and you know you're going to be nice and accurate, then obviously that's a way of saving some of your sewing time, so you can be wearing it quicker. So I'm then going to place that where I finish cutting, making sure it's dead on, and cut that out. So finish cutting that out. I'm then going to put my front on the fold there. Okay, now you can just, because you've got the layered panel. Okay, so because you've got the layered panel, so you've got that ruche skirt top section, you don't necessarily need the front lining. You might want to go for something lightweight because you're already going to have sorry, two layers there. If you really want to, what you could do is you could cut out your front, and they could use your front piece to cut yourself a gusset piece, in which case all you need to do is measure up approximately 8 centimeters from your bottom of your crutch up the leg and take that straight across, and you could create a front gusset. If not, fully line it. However, because of the two layers, it's probably absolutely fine as it is. The only time you might want to do that is if you're using a white fabric or something that might be slightly more see-through. What we're going to do now is we're going to create the twist cup, so the entire top of both the bikini and the swimsuit. So it's exactly the same instructions, really easy to do. What we're going to do is we're going to start by coming to this section of your instructions. If you move forward, you've got the swimsuit here as well, which will explain the rest of the swimsuit. So you want the first page here to start making the top. So for this strap, we've decided to do the wide one, and as you'll see, it's got an inverted shape here. So what you want to do is you want to put your right sides together, and we're going to be sewing on the outside of this edge. So we're going to be sewing across the top there. Now I've overlocked mine, but again, if you're not, if you don't have access to an overlocker, you can use your stretch stitch on your flat machine. Here's what I've already done and turned through, and I've just pinned those, as it says in your instructions, to the curved section of your top part. So what I'm going to do is sew this one together as well, turn this through, and show you how we are going to pin both of them on before we sew them together. Okay, so once you've got both your straps, so I've pinned this one here 5 centimeters in from the curved edge. So you've got a straight edge, and then you've got the curves which are opposite each other. So I know it looks like a bit of an odd shape, and I know it seems weird that you're going to be sewing this strap to this side and this one to this side, but because we've got that twist at the front, that's going to make sense in a minute. So sew these down so they're in place before we take the the other layer, so it's going to be exactly the same as this, and you want to put those right sides together. So you can choose to either pin these and you can sew at the same time, or you can sew these in place just so you know that they're not going to move, and then you can do the next stage. Once you've sewn that, so what we're going to be doing is we're sewing along this curve here, round the curve here, and to the edge of the fabric, leaving this straight edge, and the side seams open. When you've done that, you can pull this through, and whilst it still looks like obviously you've got a strap at each side, what you're then going to do is you're going to twist, let's do it the other way, you're going to twist your bikini top, so you end up with both of your straight edges down at the bottom, your curved edges at the top, and your straps obviously both at the top, like so. Okay, so when it comes to sewing the other end of the straps into the back section, you want to take your notches, so this is 12 centimeters in from both sides, and although this has a curve and it looks like it's fighting against that, again, that will take the correct shape once it's sewn in. So put your outer edge, so the lower part of your curve, this side here, onto your notch. And again, if you're a confident sewer, you may wish to just pin these and sew your top panel straight on top of those, or you may wish to stitch those down first so you know they're not going to move out of place. So pin those both. So again, they will look like they're at a little bit of an odd angle to start with. So I'm going to machine those in place so I can show you what they'll look like when they're turned. Once you've sewn those on, so as we said, it does look a little bit odd when it's like that, but when obviously the panel is then down, that curve is then following the curve of the back of your back piece. So turning them back around again, what we're going to do is we're going to get your other layer, so the second piece that you cut in the same fabric, we're going to pin along here. If you're overlocking, then just be really careful. Maybe just pop a couple in just to make sure that they're roughly in the same place, because you can work as you go along. If you're using a flat machine, or if you're confident in your overlock and you know that you won't forget to take your pins out, then obviously you can put in as many pins as you like. Okay, so once you've put those together, you can then turn that through, and you have your front and your straps, and obviously your straps are then sewn into your back as well. So what you're going to want to do next is you're going to want to sew your sides of your front to the sides of your back. So what you can do is if you pick these up like so, so you're putting the bottom of that side to the bottom of that side, then you can just pin so that the seams meet. So that's your underarm seam. So even if you just want to put one there, just to make sure they stay lined up when you turn it through. And then what you're going to do, whether you're using your overlock or your flat machine, you're just going to stitch all the way down here and then all the way down there, and you're going to do that on both sides. I'm just going to show you what that would look like with a contrast, but obviously that's completely down to you. This is a great way of using your scraps of fabrics and not sending them to landfill, and also make a cute little headscarf. So there you've got that, so you've got a little bit of detail there. You've already got the twist, so obviously you don't need to put anything there, and that just comes down creating this section here. Now if you're making the swimsuit, obviously it's going to go into the bottom of the swimsuit. If you're making the bikini, it's going to go onto the waistband. If you've made the top part of the Cici bikini and swimsuit, but now you've decided you're going to go on to continuing to making that into your swimsuit, you're going to have started, if you finished the first tutorial, with this top part again. Now I've added the fin strap for the swimsuit. It's made in exactly the same way in the tutorial that I created with the wider strap. So to that point, that's exactly what you'll be doing. Now for the next step on the swimsuit, what we need to do is we're going to get your top skirt pattern. So the top skirt pattern is the one that's going to be gathered on the top layer. Now to start off with, all we need to do is just hem the bottom of that. Now I'm going to use a twin needle on my domestic sewing machine. You can use, if you don't have a twin needle, you can use a zigzag stitch or lightning bolt stitch, so something that's going to stretch with the fabric. So once you've got your twin needle stitch and you've got your hem sewn up, so that looks nice and neat because that's going to be obviously visible from the outside. What you need to do now is you need to use a long stitch to use as a gathering stitch. So you're going to start from top all the way down to the bottom on both the left and the right sides. It won't matter if you do this on the right or wrong side because obviously that will be sewn into your seam. Once you've done your 2 rows of gathering stitch, you're going to start by pulling your top thread and creating your gather all the way down your top panel, and what that needs to fit is your front section. So this is going to be underneath, but the top needs to, the side seams need to be the same length. So that's a really good guide for you to use because you can just literally lay it next to it, keep pulling and gathering. Okay, see that a little bit better. And obviously once you've done one side, you just move over to the other side. Right, so what you're going to do after that part is you're going to lay your pieces as follows. So you're going to do your skirted gathered side section right way down. You're then going to, if you're going to add a lining layer, you're also going to do that right way down. If you're not and you're going straight in for your main layer, then that will be right way up. You're then going to sew the small section between the notches on your pattern across your front. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my 2 front sections together, so my skirted layer and my main layer. Now if you're adding a lining layer, then obviously that's going to go in between, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew the section between your 2 notches, this seam here that's going to go underneath your bust. So once you've sewn that, you're going to cut into the stitch line. Once you've done that, put your right sides together. Now in the instructions, it does explain how to do it if you have a lining layer as well, but because it's quite a nice thick fabric, I've decided not to, although I have done a double back just to make sure obviously that there's no see-through on the bum or anything. But because you've got the skirted layer on here, and also it only goes up to underneath the bust and the bust is doubled, I am using a self-lining, so I'm using the same fabric. So right sides together, using the notches at the top of both of these pattern pieces, I am going to sew from notch to notch using my 1 centimetre seam allowance. Once you've sewn along your stitch line along in that gap there, what you're going to do is you're going to cut into the top as close as you can to the edge of the stitch line without cutting any stitches. So essentially what you end up with is 2 notches right at the end of that stitch line. Then when you turn that through and you have your gathered skirt layer on top, like so, so you have your knickers there, your gathered skirt section, you're also going to have this part here, which is where your twist bust is going to be attached to. Now you've got that gap, what you're going to be doing is obviously you've already have your gathered section and your main fabric here. So what you're going to have is you're going to have your gathered section face side down. You're going to have your swimsuit, your main fabric right side down, but obviously they're attached anyway. Then you're going to have either your lining layer or your actual fabric right side down, and then you're going to have your actual fabric right side up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now overlock down both those sides, making sure that all of the edges meet at the top, but at the bottom that the skirt is coming 2 centimeters higher than the front knicker and the 2 back knicker layers. So once you've got that sewn at the top, what you're going to do is lay this out so you're just working with your front gathered section. Then we're going to get one of your back panel sections, and that's going to go right side down. Then we are going to have one that goes right side up, and then we are going to bring over your top layer so that sandwich the back pieces in. You are now then going to sew all of your side seams together, trying to make sure that your gather stays even, matching them all 4 layers at the top, but making sure that the gathered skirt part is 2 centimeters shorter at the bottom. We've got your hemmed top layer here. We've got your seams all sandwiched in, so there's no nasty seam on the inside of the garments. That's all nice and neat. And they are sewn together down both side seams. You've also got your section here, so you're ready to attach your top. Now, what we're going to do first is we're going to finish off the legs. So we don't want to have a nasty seam on the crotch area either. So what you're essentially going to do is you're going to put your layers, so if you take your bottom layer, your top bottom layer and your front, and then you bring that round, so you're almost creating a sandwich there. Now that will make more sense when you sew that together, because then when you turn that in, the seam is in between the back panels rather than in the crotch seam. Okay, so that's overlocked together in between the back panels. So when you turn it through, where you've got the front that will sit on the crotch area, you've got no seam there to rub. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to be rubbering and cover seaming or finish stitching around your leg holes. So for this, I recommend this centimetre wide swimwear elastic. Now you can use other elastics, so if you have something already and you want to try and use that, obviously you're more than welcome to. However, for the purpose of this, I'm going to be using this elastic. I've used the rubber that we just spoke about, so I've used the swimwear elastic, and I've actually put this on with an overlocker. Now you do have to be quite careful not to trim it, so it takes a little bit of practice. So if you don't feel too confident, you can put that on with a zigzag stitch on your normal sewing machine. However, what I've done is, as I've gone round, I've just created, like it says in the instructions, just a little bit of tension in the elastic, which then when you look at this seam here, so this is going to be going across your bum, once that's hemmed, you're going to have something that gives you a nice kind of figure hug. Not so it's really tight, but just so that it doesn't gape. You don't want your leg holes to gape. So I'm going to do the other leg hole, and then I'm going to use my twin stitch to hem both of the leg holes. I've just finished twin stitching round, and you can see that's given a really lovely hem. So where obviously we've had the gather in the elastic, you want to pull that slightly as you're stitching so that that doesn't snap. Although obviously although a twin stitch is good, or a zigzag is good for stretched fabric, if you pull it out, then you won't end up with loads of gathers and things like that as well. So that's a really good finish. So your bottom half is now completely done. So all that's left to do is attach your top piece. Now, this is actually a lot easier than you would think. So what I would suggest you do, first of all, is just find the top of your, the center of your back seams. Now, I do like to notch rather than pin, because for this part, we're going to overlock as well. And now we can always flat stitch first, so you can overlock obviously to finish it off neatly inside, but we can always flat stitch first. Now this section that we had here at the front, what we want to be attaching here is right sides together, the gap between your twisted bust section. Okay, now I'm just going to get that here. So what I mean by that is when you've got your piece like this, you've got these two sections that come down, that create a twist and a gap here, and you have your straight sections that then lead onto your side seams. So with right sides together, you're going to pin the end of that gap in the skirted, in the bottom part to the beginning of the open section of the top part of the swimsuit. Sorry, that doesn't make sense. I'm going to show you, because it is a little bit, there's a lot of top sections and a lot of bottom sections. Okay, I'm going to pin these sideways so I can show you. Right, so what I mean is, so this is the twist of the bikini, this is the section, but they are right sides together. Now you can see I've put those pins there because you're going to be starting sewing from 1 centimetre in, which is where these little sections come inwards, okay? Once you've done that, you can then start to pin your side seams so they sit together. And then you can also pin your centre back. Now once you've done that, as you've got pins in, to make this easier, I would say use your flat stitch first, and then we can go around with the overlocker, because that way you can test it and make sure you've got no gaps or anything like that in any of your layers. Okay, so let's get that flat stitched and then let's come back after we've done that. So once you've stitched round, take your pins out, and you just want to check before obviously you overlock it because it'll be too hard to do. You just want to check round and make sure that you haven't got any holes in your seam, which we don't. So once you've done that, if you don't have any holes, you can go around and overlock that edge so it's nice and neat inside. Okay, so that's all been overlocked, and here we have your gorgeous finished Cici swimsuit. Now, I don't know if you can see that on there. So you've got that really lovely finish here. So it's nice and flush. You've got your nice, neat overlocking inside. Your thin straps, little gathered tummy hiding layer, and in the classic red as well. So I wanted to go classic for this one, for the demonstration of the video. And that's it. So make yourself your Cici skirt in a fabric that can match, so you can wear those together. You could even make this into a dress. You could make this into, you could use this in a stretch cotton or something like that, a jersey, a pontoroma, and make the skirt in the same fabric or similar, and that would make a really lovely dress combination.